Guys, welcome to today's lesson. My name is Srinidhi. I'm an educator on Unacademy. I teach English grammar on this platform. You guys can follow me on Unacademy by downloading the Unacademy Learning app, and also please check out the YouTube channel. So in today's lesson, we're going to do the character analysis of a few more important personalities from Pride and Prejudice. So let's get started. So guys, we're doing the character analysis. This is the third lesson under character analysis. So the first lesson was about Elizabeth Bennet, and then the second lesson on the character analysis was about Mr. Darcy and Mrs. Bennet. So in this particular lesson, we're going to see the character analysis of Jane Bennet and Charles Bingley. Okay, now let's get started. So Jane Bennet is the eldest daughter of the Bennet sisters and the most beautiful one. So actually you cannot find it often that Jane Austen describes a person as beautiful. So she describes Jane to be very beautiful and Wickham to actually be handsome. So this is something important that we'll have to keep in mind. So Jane is considered to be one of the most beautiful characters and the most beautiful sisters of the Bennets. Now, she's very reserved. So that means she's not as outspoken as Elizabeth is, but she's very shy, very soft-spoken and reserved. She does what she's being told to. So if she's asked to follow the societal norms, she does. If she's asked to do, she does it even without questioning it. So she is like the ideal daughter that Mrs. Bennet would ever want. Okay, and the way she interacts with Bingley contrasts the way Elizabeth interacts with Mr. Darcy. So she is very pleasant in the way she talks, and she's very kind, so very soft-spoken, so which actually sparks interest in Bingley, and they hit it off in the beginning itself. Whereas if you see Darcy's and Elizabeth's conversation, you can actually find a lot of heated arguments between them even at the first meeting. So it gives a striking contrast to the way Jane's character is built over time and Elizabeth's character is built over time, and the same applies to the relationship between Jane and Bingley and Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth. So these four characters are extremely contrasting and very unique in their own way. So if you go in depth, you will have a lot of information about them. And she's very naive. So she's very naive in the sense she's very innocent. So she never once Elizabeth tells her that she's never seen a girl who can never see a fault in anybody, and the world is all good to her, and she never speaks ill about any human. So that is one of the best qualities that Jane possesses. That means for her everything is fair, for her everything is good. So she actually sees good qualities in people and not their bad qualities. So that is a very, very nice and a unique trait that a person can possess. So we have Jane for it. Next one. She's disappointed when Bingley loses interest in her but waits for him. So in the due course of time, Mr. Bingley is asked to distance himself from Jane Bennet on the advice of Mr. Darcy, because Mr. Darcy thinks the relationship between Jane and Charles is not serious. So Charles agrees to it. He lets his friend guide him, and he actually distances himself from Jane, which breaks her heart. But she tries to meet him. She goes to London using the visit to her friends as a reason, but she encounters Miss Bingley instead of Mr. Bingley, and Miss Bingley behaves very rudely with Jane, but she does not say anything in return. Whereas this, unfortunately, Mr. Bingley does not visit her when she is in London. But she does not lose heart. She comes back home and she waits for Charles to come. And eventually, her good nature is paid off. Charles comes back to Netherfield Park, and courts her, and they get married. So now let's move on to Charles Bingley. So Charles Bingley is a wealthy young man. He is the owner of Netherfield Park. As I told you, people who belong to the very high social status get to own mansions, get to own parks, get to have a house in the countryside, and also gets to have servants because they have enough money and wealth to pay them all. So, unlike Mr. Darcy, he's very popular because of his kind nature and pleasing manners. So, he's very popular in Netherfield Park, the one which he owns, because he is known for his kind nature, gentle attitude, pleasing manners, and very generous and kind attitude towards every single person in that area. So, whereas Darcy, again, there is a contrast in the characters. Darcy is very arrogant, rude, obnoxious in the beginning, yes, but towards his servants that he owns in his estate, he is very kind and generous. So there's a lot of difference in different scenarios. So if you are paying attention, if you know what their basic traits are, you'll be able to develop it. And his love for Jane is instant, but is discouraged to continue. So the first time when they met at a ball, he takes interest in Jane because of her kind attitude and pleasing, manners and behaviors. But he is discouraged by Mr. Darcy to not continue because Mr. Darcy thinks he's not serious about this relationship and he does not want, him to lead Jane on and then break her heart. So eventually he agrees to Darcy and he distances himself. So he leaves Netherfield Park and he goes back to London and refuses to meet or talk or write letters to Jane. But you can actually see that Charles Bingley comes off very low in self-confidence, and sometimes he lets his friends and sisters manipulate his thoughts. So just like the times where Miss Bingley misbehaved with Jane, he does not say anything. And even when his friend gives his ideas or asks him to not continue being friends with Jane, he agrees to it even without questioning him. So he is very manipulative. So that is one of his weaker traits. And to him, Mr. Darcy acts as a philosopher and an advisor. So whatever Mr. Darcy says, he accepts it even without thinking twice or questioning about it, because he puts a lot of trust in Darcy, and whatever Darcy says is right according to Charles Bingley. And then you can actually, this is a quote said by Elizabeth. So she says this to Jane Bennet, that Charles Bingley is a man who is very easy to understand. So yes, just like she says, he is not a very complicated character at all. Very simple, very plain character without many complications. Only thing is he's a little bit manipulative, but at the end he still comes out of his shell. He's thought it through, and then he agrees and he convinces himself that what he feels towards Jane is love, and he comes back to Netherfield Park and courts her and gets married. So again, love triumphs in this lovely couple's story. So that's it for today. I'll see you guys in the next lesson where we will do again character analysis. Bye bye until then.